Gracias, Mónica. Gracias a todos los que están presentes nuevamente, como cada 6 semanas en nuestra teleconferencia de granos. Agradecer a nuestros compañeros delegados de OIMA, a todos nuestros amigos y socios y principalmente a los ponentes de este día. Gracias a Melissa, Gregory, por tomar tiempo para darnos la expectativa.
That we give our appreciation for Amarillo, United States next year. I know that this is an agenda that is somewhat complicated, and we are going to try to be able to assist the rest of them. So thank you. This meeting is important because it is, as a region, we need to have the expectation. And in the case of the weather, because we have, as we all know, we are going to have a very complicated year with the Niño, causing a drought. And therefore, it is very probable that we will have some sort of affectation during the year. And so that each one of the countries might have an idea of what to expect regarding humidity conditions for the region. We're having this meeting that we are going to deal with this topic, the production of corn in the United States, and of course, the current situation of the prices in the region. So once again, thanks to all of you for your punctuality. Thanks to OIMA, the Technical Secretariat, for allowing us to have this invitation for today. And without further ado, to give the floor to Lorena so that she can do her presentation.
Buenos días.
Good morning. Good morning.
Buenos días, Lorena, buenos días.
Good morning, Lorena. Good morning to all of you. Well, as you already know, my name is Lorena Aguilar. As always, as Nestor said, thank you very much for being here today. We have 30 connections. We have many people connected in some of them. We have a very good attendance from different countries. We can identify that we have Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Panama, and even some people from Colombia. We have Costa Rica. We have not been able to identify Nicaragua and Belize and Dominican Republic at this moment, but everybody is welcome. As Nestor says, these conferences are very important, especially when we are facing situations that might happen, such as this possible event, climate event, the Niño, that we have at Uranus, and that might have an affection for the most vulnerable people. So without taking any more time, we will give floor to the people who are going to present. And thanks a lot for all the contribution and for all the information that you are always willing to provide and contribute with. And thanks to all the presenters and to everybody that has prepared their presentations and have dedicated time to send out information, be able to make possible this conference. Sincerely, this network, and for all the network for contribution and maintenance throughout all these years. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you, Lorena. Thank you. We would give the floor now to Melissa so that we can begin with the content of the presentation. Just allow me a minute. I am going to share my screen so that we can see the slides in Spanish. I think that we can see the screen now.
All right, thank you, Carolina. And actually, I did, and let me turn off because I'm still getting the English subtitles. Sorry, that way I can mute the audio so I don't have somebody talking at me while I'm talking at the same time. Going ahead and I think it turned off. There we go. Looking at the USDA corn projections, if we want to go to the next slide. We do have a lot of updates this month. As you see, we have now started in with our 23-24 projections. We have dropped the estimates for the years past and basically moved on to the next year. So that will be one of the big changes is now we do have 23-24 estimates for those marketing years.
Melissa, sorry, can you give me just a second, please? Because we are not hearing the interpretation in Spanish.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, just a minute. Compañeros, no estamos escuchando la interpretación. Ahora sí.
Go ahead, Melissa, please.
Okay. I don't know how much they said, but I was just going to say that we have moved ahead into the 23-24 marketing year. So USDA has rolled over. So we are looking at our estimates once again, which would be for next year's marketing year, and haven't really looked back as much. We figure the numbers for the 2021 year are set. So going ahead and looking at that, the 23-24 US corn outlook is for larger production. That includes greater domestic use and exports and also higher ending stocks. The corn crop is projected at a record 15.3 billion bushels, which is up more than 10% from last year. And those are on paces on both yield and the area. Yield projection is now set at 181.5 bushels per acre, and that's once again based on a weather adjusted trend, assuming some normal planting progress and also the summer growing seasonal weather. Looking at the 1988 to 22 period, we are expecting warm seasonal weather, but also favorable towards rain. Beginning stocks are up slightly, and the total corn supplies are forecasted at 16.7 billion bushels, which is the highest since the 17-18 period. Our total U.S. corn use for the 23-24 forecasted period is expected to rise about 5% relative to year-ago levels. Once again, that's on higher domestic use and exports. That includes food, seed, and industrial use, and it is projected to rise 55 million bushels to 6.7 billion bushels. Corn use for ethanol is also projected to increase 1% based on expectations on some increasing in gasoline as more people are traveling, as the U.S. did officially within the last few weeks call an end to the pandemic. So that's part of that. Also, feed and residual use is projected higher on a larger crop and lower expected prices.
Can I ask you a favor?
Yeah.
I hear you breaking out. Could you maybe, I don't know if it, maybe turn off your camera? I don't know if that might help because I'm hearing you breaking out. I can hardly hear you.
All right, I'm so sorry. I hope this will help. Once again, just that is on expected progress we are expected to see on lower prices. For anyone watching the CME Board of Trade over the last few weeks, you have noticed a drop in the corn prices. Some of them have been significant. Also, we are expecting lower corn exports, or excuse me, higher corn exports for the 23 forecasted year to 325 million bushels to 2.1 billion. Lower prices once again supporting a sharper increase in global trade and following the declines seen after higher prices in the 22-23 market year. We are also expecting the U.S. market to increase slightly globally over the past 5 years, and exports are expected higher in Argentina and Brazil. Once again, after we are seeing some more normal weather conditions return to those countries after the drought of the 22-23 marketing year. And despite this rebound, we are expecting a large export of corn for the second consecutive year. Also, exports for Ukraine are projected to decline based on lower production prospects. The U.S. total corn supply has been rising more than use, which means ending stocks are going to be up. Since we are basically producing more than we are using, they are going to be up about 805 million bushels from last year and would be the highest in terms since the 2016-17 marketing year. The stocks would represent about 15.3% of the usage, which is the highest since the 18-19 year. And the season average farm price is projected at $4.80 a bushel, which is down almost $2 at $1.80 from last year's projected 22-23 season. The global coarse grain outlook for the 23-24 season is for record production and record usage, and also larger ending stocks as well. The world corn production is forecasted at record highs. The largest increases in the United States, Argentina, EU, China, and Serbia. However, that will be partially offset by smaller projected crops from Ukraine and Brazil, as once again the war in Ukraine is still ongoing. The world corn use is expected to rise about 4%, with corn consumption increasing by a similar amount. Lower prices, once again, that we have seen, especially over the last couple weeks to a month. World corn exports are forecasted to grow only about 5%. Several key countries, including China, Egypt, Vietnam, and also those are partially offset by reductions from the EU and Turkey. The global corn ending stocks are up about 15.5 million tons to 312.9 million tons. That mostly reflects larger stocks for the United States that are partially offset from declines in Brazil and China. If we want to go to the next slide. As you can see, once again, we are now into the world corn supply, which means we have dropped the 2021 year. We're going ahead now, looking at 21-22. We didn't see a whole lot of adjustments to the numbers here. 22-23, we saw some small adjustments once again from last year. Usually those are like some ending stocks, exports, etc. The new numbers are these 23-24 projected numbers that would be on the right of your screen. Once again, that blue number is how the world, we are expecting over 1,219 million tons. So, and that is for the world less China is at 939. US accounts for 387 of those, and the total corn is 831. So as you see, year over year, we are seeing that number, that 1219, the world stocks and the supply right here increase. The marketing year for 21-22, the first year, as you see, it even increased 2 million metric tons, and that was a big year. So we are in last year at 1,150. So we are seeing quite a big jump. And once again, with usage not increasing that much, we are expecting ending stocks to once again be quite higher. If we want to go to the next slide. The corn supply planted and harvested acres, once again, not a lot of in the first two, the 21-22 and 22-23 estimates. There's been some slight adjustments in 22-23, that middle number. But as we are seeing here in the 23-24 projected numbers, what we are looking at this year is we're looking at 92 million acres planted. That's almost as much as that record year we had back in 21-22, just slightly under it. But once again, you can see a big increase from last year from that, just about 88.5. So we are seeing quite a few more acres planted this year. Also, you can see area harvested from last year. We went from 79 million acres harvested. We're going to be up an estimated 4 million this year. I explained again, but just in case anyone forgot, there's a difference between the area planted and the area harvested. A lot of that has to deal with any kind of natural disaster issues, flooding, etc. Where basically a lot of that is from replant. is why you see a lot of that difference, and also if
Por eso
some
es
of
que
that,
vemos mucha diferencia y también
so a lot
por
of
eso es
that
que
will
vemos,
be planned on. Let me make sure hopefully the audio is off. Sorry, it keeps flicking through occasionally, but anyway, so a lot of that is just differences in things like that. If we want to go to the next slide, the world corn supply. Yes, next slide. There we go. Thank you. Is our world corn supply beginning stocks. Once again, 21, 22, and then 22, 23 last year, we saw quite a rise in that number, that 308. Whereas this year we are seeing beginning stocks down. Just once again, we did have quite a bit of usage last year. The ending stocks are not expected to be as high next year. So we will be looking at those numbers, but once again, those estimates aren't out quite yet. Also, if you look at the world less China, those numbers have gone down quite a bit there, almost 7 million metric tons. And then the ones, sorry, getting audio, I can't make the audio stop, so sorry guys. Anyway, I will just keep going. So as we've seen those numbers this year compared to last year, the beginning stocks, especially for the world, they have dropped some, or basically every single thing except for the United States. You saw our numbers increase, but it's only by about 1 million metric tons. So we did not see a huge increase there. Most of the rest of the world did see, or excuse me, most of the rest of the world did see a decrease while we saw a slight increase. And we are expecting some more increases next year just because of what we are expecting is might be a bumper crop this year. If we want to go to the next slide. Looking at the weather, this was once again January, just going over a brief again. As you saw, we had quite a bit of drought. That big red blob in the middle is right in our what's considered our corn belt. If you go to the next slide, you can see this is updated. There we go. Yeah, it's updated. So a lot of that red and even some of the orange has once again decreased. I showed that last month. This trend has continued. As a matter of fact, I'm raining right now. So that is definitely some good news from us. Some of the severity of this, especially in our corn belt, where most of the corn, soybeans, other crops are grown right in the center of the country, has decreased. Next slide. Once again, also here for the seasonal drought outlook, this was the beginning of the year. As you see, we had quite a lot of drought persisting. We had some removal likely, and if we go to the next slide, you will see the most recent one updated how a lot of that has been removed. Once again, this is in our corn belt, so this is looking a lot better than it did at the beginning of the year, which is why some of these numbers have changed so much, and why they're expecting a much better crop and much better outlook for this year. So this is some good news. This is, and some of this has really come even from last month. I showed the center of that where we were seeing a lot of that green and that tan that's been removed from that dark brown. Some of that was still there last month. So even in the last 6 weeks since we last met, we've gotten quite a bit of rain that has helped, honestly, quite a bit. So if we want to, real quick, if I could go, because I'm sorry, Caroline, I thought that I included something. If I could share my screen for just 2 slides very quick, I was just going to show, I do have some corn planted and corn emerging numbers. I think it looks like, are you seeing the numbers here? It looks like. for corn planted in the United States? Okay.
Yes, we're looking at them, Melissa.
Okay, excellent. I was just making sure. So if you see this, as you saw from last year, a week ago, and this last week, the new numbers will actually be out tomorrow. So we're just about a week behind. But as you can see from even 2 weeks ago to a week ago, except for a few that were in the 80s and 90s, we are seeing quite a large marginal jump here, a lot of 20, even 30%. Some of the ones that were already, this is a 30%, there's almost 20% right there. Some of the numbers that were in the 80s and 90s, of course, you just don't have that. But some of these numbers, for example, 5 to 32 in the planted areas, you see a lot of really good jumps. That's just because some of the weather has cleared up because those rains over the last 6 weeks have helped, and they've cleared up enough now that they're not just working in mud. Also, you're seeing quite a bit of warmer weather, especially in some of these states that are in the northern part of the country. So like this is one of our most northern states, was only at 5%, moved to 32, just because they finally got rid of some of their snow and frost finally. So once again, 40% jump here. We've just seen a lot. These 18 states, once again, are 92% of last year's corn crop. So we do have a few other states that plant, but they do plant a very small amount. And as you can see, the averages compared to the 5-year average, most part we are above. We're about 81% planted right now. The average is about 75. Last year we were only at 65, or sorry, last week we were only at 65, and last year we were only at 69. So we've really seen a big jump in corn planted the last week or two. The last one that I have real quick is corn emerge for those states who are a little bit more southern. We're able to get in a little bit early. Last year, you saw we are usually only at about 35% emerged of those that have already been planted. Last week, we were only at 30%, and this week we are at 52%. So once again, quite a big jump, over 20%. Our average is about 45. So last year, we were a little bit behind last year because we did have some later colder weather. And last week we were a little bit behind, but right now we are running ahead of track. This warm weather once again, and even just a little bit of the drying out from some of the rains that we've got has really helped the corn get in the ground, and that had already been in the ground get emerged. So once again, we are seeing quite a bit of a jump here in some of these numbers from last week to this week on the corn that is planted. So just wanted to give you an update on that we do have some corn planted, but you have a bunch of it emerged. So the planting progress here is really starting to look up. So I believe that is all I have for you. Sorry, I didn't have those slides and that. I just realized that I forgot those, and so I will send that to you if you would like.
Muchísimas gracias, Melissa, y gracias por compartir también esta última información.
Melissa, thank you for sharing this last information with us. I don't know if somebody has a question. You can raise your hand, or you can do it through the chat, whatever way you like.
Creo que no tenemos preguntas por el momento. De nuevo, gracias, Melissa. Sabemos que tu agenda está... Néstor, adelante.
Melissa,
All right. Well, thank you
disculpa,
guys. Sorry, I have to leave early. I've got another-
Perdone que tenga que irme temprano. Tengo otra reunión.
just a little bit. So, but
Just
thank
one
you guys.
question, Melissa, just one question.
Yes.
Melissa, sí, perdón, solo una pregunta rápida.
Just a quick question. Maybe to have the data. Can you give us, giving us the data production in bushels? Do you know how much is the equivalent of a bushel in a metric system in kilograms or something? Do you know what is the equivalent of a bushel?
So sorry, because I'm sorry, you're still breaking up. What is the equivalent of a bushel?
Of bushels to metric system, tons or kilograms or something. Is there an equivalent?
A bushel for us is just over 26. It's about 0.035 cubic meters. Trying to 1 bushel corn is approximately 56 pounds, so it's about 25 kilograms, about 25 and a half kilograms. Does that help? So basically, for every acre, we're expecting, let me get my calculator on, just over 181 bushels per acre. So we're expecting about 46, just shy of 4,600 kilograms of corn to be produced per acre. I'm trying to think what acres to hectares is real quick.
Gracias,
So 1
Melissa.
acre is about 0.4 hectares. So it's just a little under half. So it would be
It's a long calculation for from bushels
sorry,
to kilograms
so,
and acres to hectares.
yeah, so for 1 hectare, we're getting about 1,840 kilograms. Does that help?
Me ayuda mucho, Melissa, gracias.
Yes, that helps a lot. Thank you, Melissa.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm not used to, I will try to remember in the future to see if I can do at least some conversion on it.
Muchas gracias de nuevo, Melissa.
Thank
Gracias.
you once again, Melissa. Thank you, Nestor, for your question. And thanks to all of you for the patience. We have had some complications with the translation, but we hope that we can solve them. And we also thank the translation team for being aware of that. And to continue on with the content, I give the floor now to Mario. He's already sharing his screen. Go ahead, Mario, please. Hello, how are you all? Good morning. Can you hear me well? Yes, fine, thank you. Okay, so we're going to do a presentation, follow-up and forecast, climate forecast. And we are going to begin by saying that we have observed a deficit in rainfall in the majority of the region, especially towards the region of the Pacific, which is where normally the rainfall begins in the first part of the season. But in the last few days, this has also extended to the Caribbean region. There are high temperatures in the region. We were between 3 and 4 degrees above the average in the maximum temperatures. And this condition evidently has affected the availability of humidity on the soils. We have also had irregular rainfall, both in time as well as in space. We have had abundant rainfall in very short periods of time, which is something that we have observed previously in other years. But these rainfall are going to be more sporadic because of the fact that we have high intensity rainfall in very short periods that have been recorded in several parts of the region, causing flooding, landslides, and in some of the areas, strong winds and maybe the falling of the ice. And according to the SHRP, this is the value that we have from February to May, which is the last information available. We can observe how in Nicaragua, basically all of Nicaragua has demonstrated rainfall in according to the last 3 months of observation, but that demonstrates a dry corridor that begins in the Pacific region of Costa Rica, and it goes through all the Pacific of Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, with that value under the average. If we observe the last 2 months also, we can see that the deficit of humidity that we have in Nicaragua is worsened. There are areas where we don't have not even 65% of the rainfall that we normally have, and some where we only have 30% of the rainfall that is recorded. We can also see how in Honduras, when we had conditions above the average, that were between 25 and 50%, these have practically reduced from 10 to 15% in only 1 month of observation. This means that these accumulated numbers correspond practically to the end of February and the beginning of March. With regard to Dominican Republic, we see that the low rainfall condition is giving in. We have rainfall here, a zone that is very much below the rainfall, but we see that they are reduced in the last 2 months. Well, the last month there has been a significant change in regard to the humidity pattern that basically begins from the border with Colombia. It goes through all of Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and it maintains only this zone of Honduras with rainfall above the average. The deficit extends, and that includes also the Gulf of Fonseca. The northern part of Guatemala also is showing some deficit, and there is a slight recovery in its border zone with Mexico, while Dominican Republic and Haiti demonstrate values that are even positive. In other words, an improvement in regard to the distribution of rainfall that we had seen in previous months. It has reduced the areas with low rainfall. And in the last few days, this is from May the 16th to May the 25th, we can clearly see the deficit of humidity that we have in all of the Central American region. Usually at this period, where we would have a large rainfall, continuous rainfalls in many regions, and others they would be establishing already. But nevertheless, we see that the deficit are very well demonstrated, and that some of the areas were not even receiving 30% of the rainfall that would normally fall. On the contrary, in the Dominican Republic, the rainfall tends to be above average. How has this affected vegetation? Well, we can see that the region of Nicaragua demonstrates values that are very low, especially
Estas zonas que vemos acá con vegetación positiva corresponden seguramente a la humedad residual que de las lluvias constantes que se recibieron durante marzo y abril en la región
is something that in March of April in Francisco Morazán, in Honduras, but it also shows a very important deficit with regard to the values of health of vegetation in the central region. Remember that here, we not only have a basic grain production, but also cattle production that might be affected if this persists. The region of Gulf of Fonseca between Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador also demonstrates values that are below average, although there is a zone here that demonstrates positive values. And in Guatemala, also we have these zones with very low value, especially in the higher part of Juchiapaca, Chiquimula, and Zacapa. In some of these, we have already reported losses of crops, especially of corn in the initial stages, according to field communication. It derived from the fact that with the first rainfall, the producers started with their planting, but there was not a continuation in the continuity and spacing of those rainfalls. So this affected the technological development of the crops. Costa Rica and Panama, in spite of the fact that they are a zone that have had a deficit in humidity in time, they demonstrate positive values for vegetation. This is because let's remember that in these zones we have constant rainfall, and although we might have a deficit of humidity, the vegetation has not been affected to this fact, excepting in the region of the dry arch in Panama, where we can observe this change in the health of the vegetation. That demonstrates a considerable anomaly regarding this observation period. This erratic condition of rainfall has led us to a irregular condition of the rainy season. This is the model that we have from satellite, remembering that we use 25 millimeters as in one of the periods and 20 in the following two, determining if there is enough humidity for the beginning of the agriculture cycle. The zones in blue tell us that the rainfall began before. The areas in pink and orange or peach that we see here show us that the rainfall began late, and that is proper to a year of a Niño. Some of the zones begin their rainfall early, some others have delays in the beginning of the season, and it is important to note that this is common under the conditions of Niño, but abnormal according to what the agriculture producers normally have. Let's go to the forecast. Rainfall underneath the average is expected for the rest of the year. We are going to continue on seeing an erratic distribution of the rainfall, both in time and space. The temperatures above average will persist, but with a lower abnormalities compared to the previous months. Those abnormalities of 3-4 degrees are going to be reduced to 1 or 2 degrees. That's because we are going to have a lot of cloud coverage. And this is going to cause, the clouds are going to cause an effect, avoiding solar radiation to go directly to the ground and to have the thermal conditioning or effect increase. This is going to be the period, the circular period is going to be abnormal in the region, especially for the areas that are known as the dry corridor. The ENSO conditions with the data that we have for the month of May, it stated that for the months of April, May, and June, we would be in a transition period according to the Nino conditions. But we know that even though we are in a transition condition, the region is already demonstrating or perceiving those ENSO conditions, and we have seen this irregular distribution. Practically up to the point of January 2023 to February 2024, we would be governed by conditions of El Nino, and therefore we will see further on what it is that we want from the models of precipitation as well as temperature. But it is important to point out that all the agricultural cycle, 2023, we would be influenced by the Nino event. What is it that is suggested by the forecast? Well, in regard to rainfall, in the first line, we're going to go for the North American model, and in the second line with the European, and in the third, in the World Meteorological Organization. All this is the assemble. This is the average of the models that they use. In the North American model for the period of June and August, we can see that from Panama to practically the region of Honduras, we would be having a probability of rainfall under the average, which would also extend for the zone of Petén and part of the east of Guatemala. In the Dominican Republic, we would have a rainfall conditions above the average according to this model. The European model is very consistent in the region of South and Central America, with the rainfall underneath the average, and with rainfall above the average for the region of Dominican Republic. While the World Meteorological Organization demonstrates conditions below the average for all of Central America, and here it includes also Dominican Republic for the period of June, July, and August. The period of June and September, let's remember that June is the first rainy peak in the rainy season, and September is the second, and here we have included the second rainy period in September. The conditions below the average persist from Panama all the way to Guatemala, and only the central region. According to the North American model, we would have average conditions, but this is something that we have to remember that has a bias in regard to the values of pixel that are being used in the evaluation. The Dominican Republic would have rainfall conditions above the average. In the European model, there are no significant changes. We can see that the conditions are maintained, and the forecast of rainfall above average also persists in Dominican Republic. While the World Meteorological Institute model indicates conditions of rainfall underneath the average for all the region. Finally, for the period of August to October, the rainfall conditions persist for the whole of the region in the American model. It is consistent for the European model, although in this model, the zones with low precipitation are reduced to parts of Nicaragua and parts of Honduras, and the World Meteorological Organization model is persistent in this reduction of the model for Central America, while Dominican Republic here is demonstrated with rainfall conditions that are average, and the previous models show us with rainfall conditions above the average. This is one of the factors that we have to take into consideration for the development of crops, and the other one would be the temperature. In this, there's not much to explain. All the models coincide that the temperature that is going to be above the average, with probabilities that exceed 60% of the average in all the models, and some of them even more aggressive, such as the case of the World Meteorological Institute or organization. And the European model that exceeds 60% of the temperatures above average. Under these conditions, it is important point out that we would be expecting an irregular distribution of rain in time and space, with important accumulations of rainfall in very short periods of time, but that would also be continuous periods with rainfall with high temperatures, which favors the evapotranspiration. It reduces the possibility of infiltration of water into the soil, and it might generate inconvenience even for some zones that have irrigation systems for the agricultural production, because they would not be able to reload the water basins, and the levels of the rivers might have important peaks in very short periods of time and not be able to maintain the flow for a prolonged period. In regard to the hurricane season, we have the two informations, that from the University of Colorado, and now we have that of NOAA, where they are very consistent in regard to the number of storms that are expected, both storms as well as hurricanes, situating that season very similar to an average, a situation that is interesting because usually when we have events of El Nino, there is a considerable reduction in the cyclone events that might be expected. But it seems that based on the analysis, the typical analysis and statistical analysis that they have carried out, they prefer to leave the season, or the data demonstrates the conditions of average season. We still do not know what trajectory they might have or the intensity, but it is important to begin with this monitoring starting tomorrow, which is when the hurricane season begins in the Atlantic region. In conclusion, rainfall underneath the average will prevail with distribution, erratic distribution in time and space. Conditions of temperature above the average will be maintained, and the hurricane season will be average according to the University of Colorado and NOAA for this year. If you have any doubts or questions, or
Muchas gracias, Mario, por la
they would be
presentación.
more
Era un
than
gusto
welcome.
tenerlo
Thank you very much, Mari, for the presentation, and it's
y
wonderful to have you once again in the meeting.
adelante.
You have your hand raised.
María, muchas gracias por la presentación.
Thank you very much, Maria, for your presentation.
En cuanto a la
In regard to the forecast of the rainfall
la República Dominicana,
over the Dominican
muy
Republic,
importante ver
it is very interesting to see
las diferentes expectativas
the
según
different
los
expectations
modelos.
according to the models, right?
Y porque uno
Because
apunta al
one
por arriba
points to the average
normal y otro por
and
debajo.
others below the average.
Y si no me equivoco,
And if I'm not mistaken,
asociado con
it is associated
cuando hubo presente el
to
fenómeno
when
del
we had the
Niño,
phenomena of the
podría
El
haber
Nino present.
habido
I think that there has been
unas condiciones secas más
a
prevalentes
more
sobre
prevalent dry
la
conditions
isla Hispaniola.
over the Hispaniola island, or Haiti and Dominican Republic.
Interpretación
And in regard to your
las
interpretation
diferentes
of these different
sobre los pronósticos
expectations regarding the
sobre
forecast
República Dominicana,
and regarding Dominican Republic,
me interesaría saber.
I would be interested to see what you think about that.
Hola, Jun. Sí, buen día. De
Yes,
hecho,
June. Hello, good morning. As a matter of fact, let's remember that each one of the models works with different simulations, and that depends precisely on the institution that runs the model. Nevertheless, what I can tell you is that under the conditions of the Nino, we have seen very low rainfall both in Dominican Republic as well as in Haiti, but that take place especially in the first season, or in Haiti, depending on the zone. I repeat, the rainfall that we have indicates that from December, based practically to the end of April, the rainfall was very much below the average in both countries, but starting at the end of April and beginning of May, and what we have gone through May, there has been a recovery in regards to the values of rainfall. This is evidently something that has been reflected in the values of health of the vegetation.
La que muestra los sensores, porque esta recuperación en cultivos evidentemente no puede
Vegetation, something that cannot happen because the deficit that we had in previous periods did not allow us the recovery of the crops, but this favors the values of humidity and hydro recharge for the second season. In conclusion, I think that the rainfall might behave on average or a little bit below average, given the last reports that we have from the rainfall that has been observed and the forecast for the mid and short term that we are counting with, hoping that this might help us to recover a little bit the adverse situation that was recorded during the previous months. Thank you. You're welcome.
Gracias, Mario. Tenemos una pregunta
Thank you,
también
Mario. We
aquí
have a
en
question
el
also.
chat.
Here in the chat, it says
Tenemos
they are
información
asking if we have information regarding the expectations
en el
of the hurricane season in the Pacific region. The hurricane season in the Pacific region is being worked on in Mexico. There is not an official communication, but it states that we are expecting a season that would be slightly below the average. Nevertheless, in conditions of Niño, the severity of these events is reduced considerably, and they are still evaluating the last output because according to what we have observed in the slide of the conditions, the census conditions, there would be throughout a very prolonged period, not to disregard the cyclone effects in the Pacific region, but this because this cannot be done. But yes, to demonstrate in the next report a considerable reduction of these type of events in the region. Although depending on the zone of convergence of the littoral Pacific and littoral, this might increase the possibility of not of cyclone events, but of low pressure events that might cause very important flooding due to the amount of rainfall that they might cause. Just as it happened in Nicaragua, on Monday, Managua was a zone that was very much affected. A similar situation happened also in Honduras and here in Guatemala and Quetzaltenango. We also reported landslides and floodings, and it's important that these strong rains in very short periods of time. In other words, the zone of tropical convergence is also another variable that has to be monitored because we would not need a cyclone event to be able to have floodings, important floodings in the region.
Perfecto, muchas gracias, Mario.
Thank you very much, Mario.
Si hay alguna otra consulta.
I don't know if we have any other questions.
Mario, yo solo tenía una duda, creo que
I just had one doubt.
antes y
I think that it has not been discussed before. Maybe it's still too early to do so,
pero no sé si
to
hay
be able to discuss it, but I don't know if there is
alguna estimación
any estimate or
referencia
any
sobre la
reference
intensidad
regarding the possible intensity that we might have with Niño that is expected for this year. The models indicate that the intensity might be moderate, although the affectations that we might have in the region are different. For example, let's remember the event of 14, 15, and 16 that was a very extended Niño and a record that exceeded the intensity and that the affection, in spite of being very strong in the region, was not as strong in other latitudes. This because the conditions of humidity that we have centered in the Caribbean sometimes benefits production. The second-hand production is the one that is affected the most is the one of first. But according to the analysis, the preliminary analysis that we have done, we might expect a moderate intensity of the Niño event for the next few months.
Perfecto, muchas gracias. Gracias por la
Thank you very much.
información. No sé si
Thank you very
hay
much for the
alguna
information. I don't know if you have any other questions
o comentario, creo que no, Mario.
or
Muchas
comments. I think not.
gracias
Mario, thank you very much
por
once again
participar en esta
for participating in this
Buen día.
conference. Thank you. Good
Buen
morning.
día. Pasaríamos entonces con Jung. Voy a compartir mi pantalla.
We would go on with June then. I'm going to share my screen.
Sí, la siguiente diapositiva, por favor.
Next slide, please.
Perfecto.
Perfect. Thank you.
Buenos días, que estén muy bien.
Good morning. I hope you're doing fine. We will
Índice de
begin
los precios de los alimentos de la
with the
FAO.
price of the food according to the FAO.
Consecutivo de descenso.
After a few months, consecutive months of reduction, April, our index gave us an increase in April. This was due to the increase of the cost in sugar and in meat. As you can see in the graph on the left side, the red line, that is the index that was is stated at 20% below its value for the same month of the last year, when, as you can see, according to the orange line, it was very, very high. The increase in the price of sugar was linked mainly to the concern of the low availability, along with the condition, the production smaller than forecasted in some of the areas. And in Brazil, although there are positive forecasts for the production of cane for this year, in the slow initiation of the harvest due to the rainfall above the average has increased the pressure. In regard to the prices of meat, the increase of the price of pork and poultry and have outstood because there has been an increase in the demand and there was also limitations in the offering in the exporting countries of those products based on the very high cost of production, but also due to problems of food safety, animal safety, sorry. In regard to cereals, the price of rice increased due to the high demand, especially that coming from Asia, but nevertheless, that increase was compensated by the reduction of the prices of other cereals that made them reduce their level of the index of prices. And the price of vegetable oils, which was a main element for the increase of the prices regarding the prices of 2022, as you can see on the right side of the graph, the blue line were constantly in descent. And in April, this reflects the abundant offer. The next slide, please. Thank you. In April,
Dieron y alcanzaron su nivel más bajo
the
desde
international prices of wheat descended and they have reached their lowest since July 2020. And this was mainly caused due to the abundant availability of the exportables that can be exported from Russia and Australia.
con el acuerdo que permitió el
That
tránsito
we have in Europe allowed us the traffic of cereals coming from Ukraine through the European Union countries that have been seen in the same month. That also contributed. Nevertheless, in the United States, the prices for wheat increased in April, with the expectation of the crop below the average due to the drought for a second consecutive year. Nevertheless, it is necessary to point out that the production of wheat is going to increase slightly nationally. Reflecting this low production that would maintain it underneath the average. And apart from that, the high prices of wheat of the United States compared to other countries, and therefore less competitive. This will depend on the exports on the 2023 and 2024 seasons will be below the average. The last thing is explaining us 70% of the production, the annual production is going to start in July, which would normally make the prices reduce in a seasonal manner. But nevertheless, due to the expectation of the forecast underneath the average, the seasonal for Christmas might not be that strong. So, in spite of the fact that it is forecast that the harvest might begin soon, it would be very difficult to be able to determine how this would behave. In the case of Canada, the downgoing trend of the international markets, as well as long with A good crop that is expected for this year that is going to begin since June, July. The quotes reduced in April, and the official forecast is expecting an expansion of the planted area and also high productivity of the grain that might affect the harvest and make it 10% higher than the average. The next slide, please. Uh, let's say, in regard to the export prices for corn, the United States, the prices increased 2% in April, which is a reflection of the decreased supplies of the grain compared to last year, which was below the average. And in the midst of May, the crops have advanced 65%, and we expect that the area that has been planted might increase compared to the interannual and have a higher level than the average. I think that it was Ernesto who had asked the crop is done, and I think that making the conversion from bushel to tons, we are expecting approximately 337 million tons in an area of 34 million hectares. According to the official source, what is expected that due to this increased price of the production in 2023, that will be harvested in September, the prices to the producers will also be lower compared to the years 2021, 2022. Aligned with what Melissa said, these prices of corn, lower prices for corn, would create a higher demand, which might bring to a halt the lowering pressure that would normally come from a very high production. So, if the demand is consolidated to reduce that downward trend, this would make it very difficult to forecast how the increase of the prices is going to be in what we are expecting. Globally, the offering and demand is similar to that of the United States because it is expected that the low prices might have a higher price might end up in the affection of the use of the corn on a global level in 2023. On the other hand, in Argentina and Brazil, the export prices for corn fell compared to for this crop underway. In Brazil, the favorable prospects point towards a record production, while in Argentina, it is estimated that the crop for this year is going to be more than 20% below average. This is a result of the very prolonged drought that they are having. And as you can see, both in the graph as well as in the table, the prices for the corn are below the average for the last year when the prices were at a record level. The next slide regarding rice. Finally, the prices for the export of rice in the United States have reduced slightly in April due to a reduced demand, along with the positive perspectives of the 2023-24 campaign, and this reflects a very significant reduction of the planted area. According to the official forecast, in 2023, that is normally harvested from August, might increase at 20% to interannual, although it is estimated that this might be literally below the average. In the campaign 2023-24, the production of rice the global production of rice is expected to reach a record level, thanks to the increase of the crop in the United States, but also in other countries, such as Bangladesh and
los precios internacionales de arroz en los
other
orígenes
areas.
de América del
And the
Sur
international
incrementaron
prices
en
of rice in
abril
South
a
America
pesar de la cosecha que está casi terminando. Y esta presión alcista, que más que compensó la estacionalidad, vino de la baja producción en 2023 a causa de una menor
has
área
presented a lower area, planted area, but also
Brasil,
low yields that were presented in Argentina and Brazil, and also
su moneda
the affection of their currency
hace las exportaciones más caras,
that makes the
presión alcista.
exports higher has added up to, an upward pressure to the Brazilian prices. And the increase of the prices in Uruguay was caused by the high demand for export that we can see in the first quarter of 2023. The export of rice from Uruguay was 20% above the 5-year average, the last 5-year average. And with that, thank you very much for listening. And if you have any doubts or questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer you.
Muchas gracias, Jun, por la presentación.
Thank you very much, June, for your presentation. I don't know if you have any questions. You can put them on the chat, or you can raise your hand as you wish.
No veo consultas por el momento.
I don't see any questions for the moment.
Creo. A ver. Janet, no. Nada más que se está incorporando. De acuerdo, creo que no hay ninguna pregunta.
Okay, it seems that we have no questions. So thank you very much once again for your presentation, and we will continue on with the part of Central America. I'm just going to share once again my screen, and I will give the floor to Robert. Thank you.
Me confirma, Robert, si ya puede.
Robert, could you please, can you see the screen? Just allow me a minute. I'm going to. And before I forget it, Robert, please forgive me for taking advantage of the fact that we still have the majority of us here. If we can take the session picture before beginning with your presentation, I'd appreciate it. So I would ask all of you to please, and as much as possible, if you could turn your camera on, and we might be supported with a screen capture. And it's wonderful to see you all in those little images here. Thank you. Good morning to all of you. I'm going to begin taking the first screen where I have the majority of you. And so I'm going to see the first one. And please have a little bit of patience because it's many of us. I need to make 2 shots. Okay, so I have the first one. Now I'm going to on to the second one. And with that, we finalize. Thank you very much. Okay, we have the photographs now. Thank you for your smiles. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and I give the floor now to Robert Carcamo, please. I'm just checking the screen for a moment, please, to change, and I'm almost ready, okay? Okay, please confirm if you see it correctly, okay? Yes, that's fine, thank you. Okay, good afternoon to all of you, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be sharing very valuable information for the region and for the market analyst, and that is something that is important. The previous presentations that were made to us by your colleagues, I think that they are very important because this allows us to give it a dimension that is a little more global, with information not only of prices, but also of forecast of production and climate. And also the movement of the agro-food markets in the world. Thank you. Next one, please. we're going to start talking a little bit about the inflation. As we can see in these two graphs, we're going to have the general annual inflation and the annual food inflation. And normally what we have seen in April, during April 2023, for the inflation is that on an annual basis compared to April 2022, is that we observe a reduction, an average reduction of approximately 19 percentage points. And I'm talking about the percentage changes observed between April 2023 and April 2022. For what corresponds to the matter of food, we are observing that in this same period of comparison, we are seeing increased averages of 18%. This is explained for different factors. One of the main factors is mainly increase in the price of energy, fuel, as well as the main elements for production, such as fertilizers that have had for this determined period, and well, they have had inflationary rates, both in general matter as well as in food. Very particularly for the case of Guatemala, we have observed increases of up to a very accelerated increases that in spite of the fact that in 2023, April 2023, is that we have been observing the increase, well, we still did not observe the loss of acquisition power in the countries. And this is something that contrasts obviously with the effect of security and food safety for the region. Next slide, please. In this graph, what we are going to observe is how the wholesaler prices have been for the year 2022-23, especially for April 2023. We see that the majority of the countries have maintained a relatively stable relationship of the price. These are the percentage changes month after month. And this can be explained a little bit by the inventories as well as the current offering, as well as some of the imports that are carried out, particularly by some of the countries, like in the case of Guatemala, imports coming mainly from Mexico. But nevertheless, when we observe the percentage changes at the interannual level, well, we can see increases between 40 and 70%. Sorry, between 9 and 50%, that is something that is telling us that we are still seeing prices that are significantly high, and this is something that is explained based on several factors. One of the factors is the high cost of production, and we have that explained basically by matters related to fuels. And when we analyze the period, we can see more increases between 40 and 70% caused by these same factors. We can also observe, Joan was also explaining it there, the matter related to the mobility, international mobility, especially for May. In the case of in the United States for 2023, and we expect an increase in production.
La siguiente, por favor.
We don't necessarily see changes, great changes. Some very quick conclusions, well, and it is that the regional supply of white corn is expected to be average for for the remainder of 2022-23. This is because of two reasons. It is because of the remnants of the first-hand production and the international imports of the region and the interregional imports of the region. A decrease is expected according to the seasonality of the production cycles in the upcoming months. And it is expected that in the planting of the first It might be delayed due to below average rainfall, especially in the Central American dry corridor, as it was being explained just recently. The international yellow corn prices have increased in April due to the flow of crops from Brazil mainly, as well as the international market for 2022 to 23-24. Much of this increase in production is going to be caused mainly by the increase of sown area as expected for the United States. What is expected? Well, it is expected that the prices will remain. And when we talk about the seasonal rainfalls for the next few months, we expect the increases and that we might be able to maintain the averages above the quinquennial period as we influenced by the low cost of production as for 2023. And to this uncertainty also of climate perspective that it favors the cycle 2023-2024 as it was being explained by our colleague Mario. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what happens with the red bean. The red bean persists significantly on an average. The average has been stabilized during the month of April, and except in some of the countries, such as the case of Panama, that has been favored by a better availability of the grain that has provided a small increase of 5%, while in the case of Nicaragua, we're also seeing some increasing trends, and this is mainly because we are observing a greater demand, seasonal demand, that has forced the increase of the prices. So very particularly in the graph, if you very particularly in the graph, if you notice, in Nicaragua, in the black dotted line, we have established two periods where we observe these peaks that the price of red bean has had, particularly for this country. If we took the rest of the countries out, and we only left in the case of Honduras and El Salvador, we would see a correlationship of prices in Nicaragua along with the prices of Honduras and El Salvador. And this is mainly because these two countries are the ones that have the biggest demand of red beans, very particularly it comes from Nicaragua. So at the comparative level, for the prices compared to the previous year and the average of the last year, well, we have observed that they are very much above the prices that have been observed on an average. And this, as it has already been explained in the previous presentations, or the previous with the corn, it has been because of the low cost of production, particularly, especially in that of corn, because of a matter of fertilizers, but with a red fence, sorry, in the case of the red beans, we have to add that there is a series of speculations regarding the possible effect by the climate conditions, which makes this price have a greater variation and volatility in the market, especially in these three countries that are Honduras, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. Next slide, please. Black bean. Regarding black bean, the prices have maintained relatively standard. This has been because there has been a regional offering and sufficient inventory to April 2023. Nevertheless, when we observe the prices at the annual comparative level in the 5-year period, we can see that the prices continue on going towards the trend. In the case of a yearly comparative, it is in the range of 10%, while in the continual it might be 20 to 25%. And this, the way it has been explained, is because of cost of production. In the case of the red bean, it has also been because of some losses that were focalized in 2022 that have strengthened those prices towards the high. So that's very. Next one, please. And what are we expecting for the red beans and black beans for the region? Well, it is expected that the red bean is lower than the centennial period due to the climate condition affection in the last 3 years. And in the case of the black bean, we forecast that the price might be maintained. It is forecasted that the rains that might be average, and they might be associated to the phenomenon of the Nino, and this might indicate an effect. This during the crops of the same year. This is something that has been explained very well by Mario in his presentation. So I don't know if this rainfall average underneath the average is something that might also cause a greater temperature for the period 2023. The export prices of black beans from Nicaragua are higher than the average due to the increase of the cost of production and the increase of the demand that they may have in Honduras or Costa Rica. And the main crop, the Fante, which is the regular price that has established the prices in February, March. But nevertheless, as it is expected that the prices will also have a seasonal moment to be able to share in the month of April. If we observe the seasonal prices, we will notice that the majority of the country, starting in the months of May, June, July, up to August, we can see slight increases. The red bean prices will persist above the 5-year period and close to those observed in the period 2022, pressured by the high production costs and the price speculation. As for the black beans, prices are expected to be below seasonal trends. Next slide, please. And this is all of my participation. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, they are more than welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Robert. I'm going to continue on with a couple of slides in regard to the rice in this case. To conclude with a part of a basic range, as we can see, in April, the prices maintained stability, the general trend that we observed for this range. Nevertheless, we continue on evidencing these progressive increases that looking at it interannually, they present a significant variation that you can see it on the graph to the right. The most relevant variation that we have observed in April are in the case of Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Dominican Republic. This is due to a combination of factors that we have. We have very specific reasons for each one of those, but in general, we can say that they are related to the increase in the cost of the acid production due to the whole aspect of input damage that we observed, and also the effect of the fluctuation of the local currencies. This is particularly the case of Nicaragua, where the previous demand is greater than that of the other countries. In regard to the import prices, especially from the United States, we see a continuous increase since 2021 due to a lower supply, which is pushed due to a lower production areas. And this has added pressure on the prices increased, and especially in Central America when we compare it to the quinquennial value and even the values of the previous year. In the general manner, the regional offer for this cycle, what is left of this year, commercial year, is expected to be average. This, thanks to the favorable production results and the production in Nicaragua. Nevertheless, we also have There's some very punctual cases in which we see a reduction in the crops. For example, in the case of El Salvador, in spite of these reductions, generally our region is highly dependent of the imports to be able to comply with the demand, and the local production has different levels of imports. For example, that of Nicaragua that has a greater production than that of Costa Rica and Panama. But we are more related to the market, to the international market, to be able to supply us ourselves of this material. And we hope that this import conditions might maintain for the next commercial period and the next. And I was also talking about the possible effects of the production in other countries, and to keep in mind the effects that the tax reduction that is expected for 2023 might have in the free trade agreement between Central America, the Dominican Republic, and the United States, because this causes a difficulty for the possibility of competing against the import price of the United States. In regard to the prices, we expect the price to remain stable, but close to those of the 2022 in the region. This due to the recent estimates of increases in international rice production for the next cycle, especially in the United States, which would promote a greater flow of exportable the offering and a greater availability to be able to supply what is exported to Central America. And just to finalize with this presentation, just some preliminary conclusions of what we have been talking about. First of all, in regard to the international prices, well, June has already shared some information regarding this, but for the case of the wheat, we see that the price has reached its lowest level since 2021. This due to the abundant exportable availability coming from some of the countries that are relevant for this cereal. In the case of maize, the prices remain stable also thanks to the new flow of the recent harvests. In regard to the inflation that we saw in the first slide that was shared by Robert, the average in April, we see a reduction, but nevertheless, with regard to the food, the rate is maintained below 15% in the region. And in some of the cases where the prices persist high, in such a cases such as animal proteins, like for example beef, poultry, and maybe even a dairy sector. This varies in some of the countries. In Honduras and Nicaragua, we still see a very high pressure in the price of the basic grain, and this is something that has to be analyzed case by case. But we do see severe deceleration in the region, although it's not as steep as we would like it to be, but it is a downgoing trend that is established. In the case of the prices for the basic grain and for the white corn, the prices were stable, although higher than that to the 5-year period. This due to the stability of the offering of the commercial year that we are about to finish, and also due to the average flow of the imports coming from Central America and other countries. Nevertheless, we are expecting that the prices would increase in the next few months according to the seasonality. I don't know when it's going to it's established in Central America, and it will be an effect, although it is a little too early to be able to affirm it with certainty. But there might be a speculative effect due to the favorable condition that we have for the production of the first for the initial production of first in 2023 due to the rainfall below the average in the majority of the countries of Central America. In the case of the red bean, we also see stability of price in the majority of the countries. Nevertheless, the prices continue significantly above average. This due to the reduction of the production, the regional production, due to the greater pressure and export demand from Nicaragua, as well as the pressure caused to the demand of export coming from Nicaragua. We saw in one of the previous slides that the prices in Nicaragua have maintained high since last year, and this has put pressure not only on the price of export from this country, but also the local prices that we can also observe in Costa Rica, El Salvador, and Honduras also. In the case of the black bean, we see a stability for prices for April. Is this related to the stability at the regional level and the adequate level of inventory? But nevertheless, just like in the rest of the products, that the prices will maintain an average high in those of 2021, 22. And unfortunately, in the case of rice, I'm going to repeat because we're a little tight on time now, but we expect stability of price in a higher level than the previous years. And that's where I would finish. I don't know if there are any questions that you can do so. If you do have a question, please do it on the chat or you can raise your hand.
Ok, creo que no hay preguntas por el momento. Como parte de la discusión general para esta teleconferencia, que ya es el último bloque de nuestra reunión, habíamos compartido algunas preguntas relacionadas con los retrasos en la siembra de la temporada de primera para tener una mejor idea o para que lo pudiéramos discutir en conjunto. Y también, pues, alguna información sobre alzas atípicas de precios que ustedes puedan observar o hayan podido observar en este último mes en los diferentes países. Entonces, no sé si
Reductions
les
that we
gustaría iniciar.
and I would like to begin with, okay, we have a question there. And the question says, do you know how are the prices of transportation of grains from the production countries to the region? Luis, land transportation or what kind of transportation are you talking about? Within the region? Or, well, it would be within the region, yeah. In the case of movement of the products, like for example, if beans and corn that take place, and because that is affecting the prices that are being seen in the markets. Out of the region, wheat or the other products are also going to another type of consumption. But for the ones that are most affected, the local production and the interregional transportation. I don't have the data of the comparative of the cost of transportation for Central America, but what we have observed is that there have been some reductions in the price of the fuel, and there have been also last year we had some situations and some border points that made it difficult to have the normal flow of the transportation of merchandise. But these were very focalized. I think that there were some cases in the borders between Salvador and Guatemala and between Honduras and Nicaragua, if I'm not mistaken. But that is something that has given in the year 2023. In the case of the cost of transportation, as I say, we have observed reductions in the price of fuel, but I can give a little bit of follow-up to that to have a better, more precise answer regarding the cost of the transportation of cargo. Thank you, Liz. Any other questions? Very well. Then I think that we might be able to go on to the questions of general discussion. If it's okay with you, because of the difference of the schedules, we can begin with a team from Dominican Republic and Panama, because I think that we are 1 or 2 hours ahead of the rest of the team. I think that we had Janet that had already incorporated. I don't know if you have access to the microphone, Janet, and you have any questions that you would like to pose. If not, we can also begin with a team from Panama. I think that we had engineer. If you would like to begin with a discussion. Hello, Jonathan. Good morning. On behalf of Panama, the delay is because of the rainfall, because the rainfall is delayed, and there is a very long dry season that has been held. And as a supporting plan, the current government has acquired some grain which they have purchased, and they have provided a technical assistance to the producers. And also, They have just approved yesterday a plan, an action plan for, how is it? What's the name of it? A climate emergency plan, an emergency climate plan. That's what's happening here in Panama. Thank you, Jonathan. And please forgive the question, but I don't know if you have any information or if you expect the reduction in rainfall to have some sort of repercussion on the commercial flow in the channel. Is there any expectation for that? Not on the channel, but nevertheless, in the perspective of the crop, yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jonathan. Regard the delay in the crops, Jonathan, I don't know if there's any specific product that has been affected more or if there is a situation, a different situation. It is something generalized. The most affected crop is rice. In the Chiriquí region, only 10% of what is normally planted has only 10% has been planted. Thank you very much, Jonathan. We thank you for the information. I don't know if anybody has a question for our colleagues from Panama. We can go on with Costa Rica. I think that we can continue. Paola, I think that you were somewhere around. Priscila, Priscila, sorry, Priscila, not Paola. Priscila from Costa Rica. Sorry, go ahead, Priscila, please. No, don't worry, Monica. Good morning, all you from Costa Rica. We might tell you that
siembra ahorita lo que es la región Brunca, que es el sur de
the
Costa Rica,
region
sí se han visto afectados por el retraso de las lluvias. Algunos han
region that is in the south of Costa Rica. There have been some losses in plantations, so the government has been handing out some corn seeds because we are planting back to crops in this region. With regard to the policies that you were asking regarding the grains, well, in Costa Rica, the only thing that we are carrying out right now is the issue related to rice. The government, what it did here is that it eliminated the matter of a reduction of prices and in tariffs. In the case of rice, 3.5%. In regard to policies for beans, there has not been anything elaborated for the moment. It has been delayed. Only the matter of donation of seed that is taking place due to the situation of the affection caused by the Niño in all of Costa Rica. In regard to the prices of some of the grains in some of the Central American countries has also been affected by this. So this is going to generate some sort of affectation to the country because we depend on certain imports and of beans and rice also. So that is more or less the situation in Costa Rica at this moment with regard to the grain. I don't know if there's any other question. Yes, Priscilla, thank you. I had a question for the case of red meat because we see a trend, downgoing trend for Costa Rica in February, and there have been increases, or they have not been increases. They are not very abrupt increases month to month, but the accumulated is very evident. So I would like to ask you, I wanted to ask you, or to corroborate it, this is because of the greater price of Nicaragua, or is there any other element involved? No, basically it's the price of Nicaragua because the production in Costa Rica is very small and we have to complete the national demand. In this case with Nicaragua, we are affected by that, by the trends of prices that you were commenting just recently. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Priscilla, for the information. Marcio had to leave. He was on his way out because he had a field visit, but he left me the information.
Marcio,
Marcio, you are there. Here I'm on my way, but I have a little bit of signal. The projections of rains, if for are those established, only the case of rice. It's 550,000 quintals that we expect for this year. It is a growth because last year was only 380,000 quintals. And this year, well, because of the tariff declaration and all that, we expect that lowered the production of rice. In regard to the incentives by the government, we have the technological aspects. That is the technological support is being given to the sector. We also have the bond to the coffee sector and also the bond to the cattle production. We're just now the one of basic grains is being delivered, and the harvests have been extended because it started raining end of April, beginning of the month of May, and all this month of May we have had very low rainfall. So we are just beginning with the harvest right now. Thank you very much. That would be the information. Thank you, Marcio. Yes, I just had a doubt that the delay regarding the delay of the crops for the first. So I imagine that this is affecting more of the corn, but they have began already. Marcio? Yes, at the end of May they began, and we do have the problem of the dry corridor, but it's much more something else. But the participants have already started planning, and we will be having some very moderate rainfall, and we are also announcing a canicula that is very severe for June and August. Is July and August. So there are some production zones that are not going to be so affected, and maybe they have invested in some irrigation. And so it is expected that those high production zones might bring this about. Thank you. We have here two questions. One from Hilda, who is asking, what does the technological bond consist for the cattle sector? The technological bond for the cattle sector consists on electric fences mainly to try to support the cattle industrial sector. And the coffee is fertilizers for this area, and the grains is seeds that are drought tolerant for short cycle production. Thank you, Marcio. And we have a question by Marco that says, do we have data of losses for crops that due to low rainfall in the dry corridor? For this moment, we don't have any information about that because normally the people didn't have rainfall at the end of April, and that's when people they, they were enthusiastic and uh, they became decided to plant. There was an announcement, nevertheless, when the Minister of Agriculture met with the main mayors of the zones of the dry corridor to try to make a strategic corridor. And also the government sector has some financing through Banamesa refinancing for the agricultural sector. We also have credits for that.
Muchísimas gracias, Marcio.
Okay, thank you very much once again, Marcio, and we thank you also for giving your time because we know you're on your way to a field visit. So we thank you for your participation. Can we go on then with the guys from El Salvador? Thank you, Monica. With regard to the questions that you sent, there is no data yet for the predictions or the forecast for these crops because the Thank you. Thank you very much for the information. I don't know if there's any question for Guatemala. I think not. So, first of all, I would just like to thank all of you for your time and the contributions. And we would just have to agree on the meeting for the next web conference that might be on Wednesday, July the 2nd. I don't know if that's okay or if anybody has a complication with that date.
Ok, perfecto. Entonces,
We agree.
ya nos
Perfect.
ponemos
Okay, and as much as
¿Qué fecha fue la que?
12 de
what is the
julio,
day?
pero no sé si eso está bien o podemos...
July the 12th. I don't know if that is okay.
Ok,
There is
quedamos
no
para el
problem with that,
miércoles 12
okay?
de julio entonces.
Okay, so we're going to do it on Wednesday, July the 12th, and when we are close to the day, we will be sending you the information and the invitation. In a few minutes, I will send you today's presentation. So thank you once again. May you have a very good rest of the day.
Gracias, buen día a todos.
Thank you. Good night. Good afternoon.
Saludos a
Good day
todos.
to all of you.